She didn't even look nervous. That's what gets me most. Across the table, in her pale blue sundress, my fiancée Lauren looked serene, like she was about to compliment the table's centerpiece, not detonate my entire existence. "I'm calling off the wedding," she said, with the same tone you'd use to order a mimosa. "I don't love you anymore." It was brunch. My parents were there. Her parents were there. We were at Brasserie Lucille, where they serve eggs on tiny pedestals and someone plays jazz guitar on Sundays. And she says this, out loud, to 6 people. Plus the waiter, who paused mid-pour of my dad's decaf like even he knew the scene had just taken a sharp left turn. I blinked. Then again. I was pretty sure my brain rebooted. I heard my mom gasp, and my dad say something that sounded like, "Jesus." Her mom didn't even flinch. Which in hindsight tells you everything. "What?" I said, because that's all I had. My vocabulary had shrunk to one-syllable words and unblinking confusion. Lauren smiled softly. I wanted to do this in private. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not in front of our families. Not with the date so close. The date. Our wedding date. June 11th. 3 weeks away. 22 grand already spent. Venue, caterer, florist, non-refundable deposit on the string quartet she picked out for our emotional but light-hearted vibe. Her dad cleared his throat. "Maybe we should step outside?" "No," Lauren said. "It's better if we're honest. Nathan deserves honesty." The worst part? She said my name like she still loved me. Like I was this cherished antique she'd outgrown but was still fond of. Is there someone else?" I asked. My voice cracked. Not dramatically. Just enough that I hated myself for it. "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. I just realized I was building a life that didn't fit me. Fit her? I helped build that life. I gave up my promotion so we could stay in the city near her new job. I helped her brother get into rehab, twice. I spent last Christmas driving 3 hours to her aunt's because she wanted tradition. I didn't even like half our plans, but I loved her. So I said yes. And she was saying no. At brunch. With my mother clutching her pearls so hard I thought they'd shatter. I looked around the table. No one was making eye contact. The jazz guitarist shifted into something slow and sad like the soundtrack had gotten the memo. My chair suddenly felt 2 sizes too big. Or maybe I had just gotten very small. "Are you serious?" I said finally. "This isn't nerves?" She shook her head. "I haven't loved you for a long time. I just didn't know how to stop." "Oh. Cool. That's not a knife to the gut or anything." I stood up. Slowly. Because if I moved too fast, I might scream. Or faint. Or flip the entire frittata platter into her mother's lap. "I'm going to leave now," I said to no one in particular. "Nathan, wait," my mom called. But I didn't. I left my jacket on the back of the chair and my dignity somewhere between the toast points and the blueberry compote. I walked straight out of Brasserie Lucille and into the next chapter of my life. Except I had no idea what that chapter was. Just that it didn't involve Lauren. And it definitely didn't involve brunch. I spent the first 36 hours in my apartment, wearing gym shorts and a hoodie I stole from a college roommate, surrounded by takeout containers and a level of silence so loud it hurt. Lauren didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't even send a "sorry about ruining your entire social existence at brunch" emoji. I deleted our wedding website. Then undeleted it. Then stared at our engagement photos, her laughing under string lights, me trying to look natural with my hand on her waist, and finally threw my phone across the room. It hit the couch. Not satisfying. The next person I heard from? Her brother Matt. "Hey man," he texted. "I just heard. That was savage. You okay?" Savage. Not regretful. Not complicated. Savage. I didn't answer. What was I going to say? Yeah, totally fine, just updating my return policy on lifelong trust. By Wednesday, my best friend Danny showed up with 2 six-packs, 1 pizza, and a bag of those frozen mozzarella sticks you pretend are appetizers but are actually therapy. She did you a favor, he said through a mouthful of crust. You don't want to marry someone who makes life decisions like a surprise TED Talk. I laughed. Then cried. At the same time. It was a new emotional cocktail I hadn't tried before. You don't get it, I told him. It wasn't just her. It was all of it. The plans. The future. The dumb Pinterest board I made so she wouldn't have to. He raised an eyebrow. You had a Pinterest board? Shut up. It was private. He handed me another beer. You were already doing all the work. That wasn't a relationship. That was customer service. That stuck. Because it was true. Somewhere along the line, I'd stopped being her partner and started being her concierge. Still, I said, she could have waited until after the waffles. Danny stayed until 2 a.m. We played video games and ranked our top 5 most embarrassing exes. Lauren made the list, not because she was the worst, but because she was the one I thought wouldn't be. The next morning, I got the email. Subject line, final wedding invoice, due immediately. $4,700. For the linens and lighting and cancellation fees. I stared at the number and felt my stomach drop into my ankles. Lauren and I were supposed to split that. Or so I thought. But the invoice was in my name. I called the planner. She moved everything to your card on Friday, she said. Said you'd agreed? Friday. 2 days before the brunch massacre. So not only did she break up with me at a restaurant with mood lighting and family witnesses, she also handed me the bill on her way out. That was the moment. That was the one that flipped the switch from heartbreak to fury. I called her. First ring. Second ring. Voicemail. Hey, I said, trying not to sound like a man unraveling. You put the final invoice on my card. I didn't agree to that. I'm not paying for a wedding that you walked out on. Call me. She didn't. Instead, I got a text. Just one line. It was easier this way. Easier. Not better. Not right. Just easier. I didn't reply. Instead, I got in my car, drove to the venue, and asked for the manager. I'd like to host something else, I said. Same date. She looked at me, confused. Like what? I smiled. For the first time in days, it wasn't fake. I don't know. Maybe a funeral. June 11th came like a punchline. It should have been my wedding day. Instead, it was 82 degrees, slightly overcast, and I was standing in a rented hall surrounded by 30 of my closest friends and a cardboard cutout of Danny DeVito wearing a tuxedo. I called it the unwedding. Lauren had the venue. She had the florist, the caterer, even the custom signature cocktails. I'd paid for it all, apparently, so I figured screw it. I was throwing a party. No first dance. No vows. No white dress. Just a taco bar, a playlist of early 2000s bangers, and a sign at the entrance that read, Welcome to Nathan's Reclamation Celebration, no gifts, just vibes. People came. Like a lot of people. Some out of pity, some out of morbid curiosity, most because they genuinely liked me and wanted to see if I'd actually go through with it. Danny emceed? Of course he did. He stood up with a mic in one hand and a mimosa in the other, and declared, Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today, because one woman said nah, and one man said fine, I'll party instead. Laughter. Applause. A random, yeah, from the back that I'm 93% sure was my Aunt Kathy after her second margarita. I gave a toast. Hi, I'm Nathan, I said, raising my glass. I was supposed to get married today. But instead, I got something better, clarity. And guac. So much guac. More laughter. Someone hooped. My high school buddy Jeremy shouted, 2GAC. It was funnier than it had any right to be. And I meant every word. Because somewhere between the catered mini empanadas and my third cranberry mule, I realized something important. Lauren didn't break me. She freed me. That night we danced. We laughed. My coworker Brittany made a PowerPoint titled, "Why Nathan is a Catch, a Data-Driven Investigation." Slides included bar graphs, meme interludes, and a pie chart labeled, "Reasons Lauren will regret this." Biggest slice. Because Nathan owns a toolkit and feelings. And just when I thought the night couldn't get weirder, she showed up. Lauren. She walked in around 9:30, wearing jeans and a leather jacket like she was auditioning for a Netflix reboot of herself. The music dipped. Conversation stuttered. I swear even the taco guy paused mid-guac. She looked around the room. Looked at me. Then said, "Can we talk?" Danny stepped between us like a bouncer at a breakup club. "Nathan's busy right now," he said, smile thin. "But he can pencil you in never." "It's okay," I said. Because it was. We stepped outside. She stared at her feet, then at me. "This wasn't what I expected," she said. "No kidding," I replied. "You thought I'd be crying into a dry boutonniere? I didn't think you'd throw a whole party." I shrugged. Refunds were off the table. So I made something new. She winced. "Look, I'm sorry about how I ended things. That was cruel." "Yeah," I said. "It was." Silence. Then she added, "You're really over it?" And that was when I saw it. That flicker of something behind her eyes. It wasn't love. It wasn't regret. It was doubt. Like maybe she'd made the biggest mistake of her life and had just walked into the moment where I realized it too. I smiled. Not mean. Just real. I was supposed to spend today pretending someone loved me the way I loved them. Instead, I got to spend it being exactly who I am, surrounded by people who already do. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then nodded. "Take care, Nathan." "You too." And that was it. She walked off into the night. And I walked back into the party. Back inside, Danny had taken off his shoes and was somehow leading a group rendition of Mr. Brightside, like it was the national anthem for broken engagement survivors. I jumped back and like nothing happened, because honestly, nothing had. Lauren's little cameo didn't dent the mood, it just confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just a recovery. It was a redefinition. That night turned into legend. Someone started a makeshift conga line around the dessert table. The florist, who came as a guest because she'd already made the damn arrangements, gave a surprisingly touching speech about second chances and the floral symbolism of healing. Apparently, peonies are all about new beginnings? Who knew? Then came the video. Danny again. He had secretly contacted my friends and family over the past week, asked them to send clips saying one thing they thought made me husband material. I wanted to hate it. I did. But then the screen lit up, and my sister said, "Nathan is the guy who drove 6 hours in a snowstorm just to fix Mom's faucet and still made it back in time for work." My college roommate popped on and said, "He's the kind of guy who asks how you really are, and won't accept fine as an answer." Even Brittany from accounting said, "He labels his Tupperware. That's long-term partner energy." People clapped. I pretended to wipe my eyes from the humidity. It was 70 degrees inside. And then, the last video. It was my mom. She looked directly into the camera, hair curled like she'd been waiting years for her Oscar moment, and said, "You don't need a bride to be a whole man. You already are." I lost it. Not full sob, just enough that Danny had to dramatically hand me a napkin like we were in a soap opera. And suddenly, everything I'd been holding in, the disappointment, the betrayal, the fear that I was unlovable because someone changed their mind about me in public, it cracked. But the air didn't rush out. It rushed in. That night ended around 2 a.m. I cleaned up beer bottles with a few diehards, handed out leftover empanadas like party favors, and watched as the people who showed up for me didn't vanish when the music stopped. That's the thing no one tells you. A wedding isn't the only thing that brings people together. Sometimes heartbreak does a better job. And when the lights went out and the room finally emptied, I stood in the quiet and said out loud, "Well, that was one hell of a honeymoon." Then I laughed. Because I wasn't broken. Not even close. I was starting. The Monday after the unwedding, I walked into work like I hadn't just been publicly dumped over brunch. My coworkers stared at me the way people stare at survivors of shipwrecks, impressed, confused, and mildly afraid to ask questions. Brittany gave me a slow clap. "You look annoyingly stable." "I'm running on cold brew and spite," I replied. "It's working." The truth? I felt lighter. Not healed. But clean. Like I'd finally thrown away a piece of furniture that looked good in the showroom but gave me splinters every time I sat on it. I had lunch alone. Not out of sadness. Out of peace. Until I got the email. Subject, please consider this. From Lauren. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it. Let it sit in my inbox like a strange smell in the room you're not ready to investigate. Eventually, I clicked. Nathan. I wanted to say thank you. For how you handled everything. For how you didn't yell, or explode, or humiliate me in return. I've been thinking a lot. About why I left. About how I felt like I was performing a version of myself that didn't belong to me. But what I did was cowardly. I let you plan a life around someone who wasn't really there. You didn't deserve that. I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was just protecting myself from facing how good I had it, and how much I didn't feel worthy of it. I know I can undo it. I'm not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to hear from me that it wasn't your fault. You were never the problem. I was. Lauren. I read it twice. Then once more, slower. And for a second I felt that old tug, the one that tells you, maybe there's still something here. The one that confuses closure with a second act. But I knew better now. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Her email wasn't a door. It was a period. And I needed a new sentence. So I did something wild. I booked a flight. Not to some soul-searching Bali yoga thing. Just San Diego. A place with water and tacos and no one who knew my name. I packed one bag, turned on my out-of-office, and left. On the plane, I didn't scroll. I didn't spiral. I just stared out the window at the clouds and thought, this was supposed to be my honeymoon week. And in a way, it still was. It just had one person. Me. When I landed, I went straight to the ocean. Took off my shoes, let the waves eat at my ankles, and laughed out loud because damn, it felt like someone had hit reset on my chest. I spent 3 days walking, reading, talking to strangers, sleeping with the windows open, and eating whatever the hell I wanted without checking for gluten because Lauren was the gluten-free one. I even danced at a beach bar one night to a live band that butchered every classic but somehow made it feel like joy. A woman named Tessa bought me a drink and said, "You look like someone who just got unchained from something." I told her she wasn't wrong. We didn't hook up. We just talked. For hours. About life and fear and what it means to start over when you thought your story was already outlined. And as I sat there, under string lights, sipping tequila with a woman who didn't know my history but saw me anyway, I realized something huge. Lauren didn't just call off a wedding. She handed me the pen. And I was finally rewriting the damn ending. 3 months later, I went to another wedding. Not mine. Danny's. Yeah, that Danny. Human mozzarella stick. King of bad karaoke and unsolicited pep talks. Turns out, while I was rebuilding myself, he'd been quietly falling in love with some woman named Heather who teaches middle school science, and could probably survive in the woods longer than both of us combined. The ceremony was small. Backyard. String lights, folding chairs, and the kind of vows that make even the cynical ones sniffle a little. I stood there as his best man, tied tie, steady hands, and listened as he said, "Love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about being complete enough on your own to choose each other every day." I glanced at the crowd. Saw Heather beaming. Saw my friends tearing up. And somewhere in that soft silence, I felt it again. Wholeness. Not because I was with someone. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. After the cake and the bad dancing, and it was bad, Danny tried to moonwalk in grass, I sat alone under the twinkle lights with a bourbon and that familiar ache you get when you love people so much it stretches your insides. That's when Heather's sister, Lena, sat down next to me. "Hey," she said. "You're the almost groom, right?" I laughed. "That's me. Local legend. 3-tier cake, 0 bride." She smiled. "Heard your party was better than most actual weddings." "You heard correctly." We talked. And I know how this sounds. I know it's tempting to wrap this up in a bow. But this isn't that kind of ending. We didn't fall in love. We fell into conversation. Easy. Real. No pressure. She asked questions like she wanted the real answers, not the polite ones. She laughed at the right places, and she didn't flinch when I told her what really happened that day at brunch. By the end of the night, I gave her my number. No big speech. No rom-com swell of music. Just, "I'd like to keep talking if you're up for it." She was. And that was enough. That's the thing about endings. We think they're finish lines. But really, they're just thresholds. Lauren ended a relationship. Brutally, yes. Publicly, God, yes. But it forced me to re-examine the quiet corners of my life I had ignored. I stopped being the guy who fit himself into someone else's picture frame. And I started painting my own. Now I take up space. I ask for what I want. I label my Tupperware and plan solo trips and say no without flinching. And yeah, sometimes I still think about the brunch. The dress. The vows I never said. But then I think about the taco bar. The dancing. The way it felt to reclaim something that was mine all along. Me. So here's what I'll leave you with. If someone ever leaves you in the middle of brunch, staring at a half-eaten quiche and a life that no longer makes sense, don't chase them. Pay the bill. Go home. Throw a party. And then write a better story than the one they walked out of. You were always the main character. They just didn't have the range to see it.